The day my daughter-in-law asked me to sign that paper, I thought it was just another banking form. She smiled, said it was for convenience, and I didn't think twice. 2 weeks later, the bank called me Mrs. Blake and her last name, and that's when I realized something was terribly wrong. My savings were gone. The house my husband built was under her control. When I tried to warn my son, he said I was confused, that I was imagining things. That's when I knew I wasn't just losing money, I was losing my family. I thought I could trust her. I was wrong. And by the time I found out who she really was, it was almost too late. If you've ever trusted the wrong person or been made to feel crazy for seeing the truth, this story is for you. Stay with me till the end. You'll want to hear how it all turned around. My name is Nancy Whitlock. I'm 66 years old, a widow, and for most of my life I worked as an accountant. Numbers made sense to me. They stayed where you left them. People, on the other hand, people change. That Sunday, I thought it was going to be just another quiet dinner. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, the kind of meal that still makes the house smell like family. My son, Caleb, had called the night before. He said, "Mom, Nadia wants to cook for you this time." I smiled when he said it. "She doesn't have to." "I know," he said, but she wants to." So I set the table in the old dining room, the one with the wooden beams and the ticking wall clock that's been there since my husband, Frank, hung it 40 years ago. When they arrived, the air filled with laughter and perfume. Nadia carried a casserole dish like it was a gift, wrapped in one of those linen towels she probably saw in a lifestyle magazine. "Mrs. Whitlock," she said warmly, "you shouldn't have gone through the trouble. We could have hosted this at our place." "It's Sunday," I said. "Sundays belong here." She smiled, that perfect, careful smile of hers, and for a moment I almost believed she meant it. Caleb looked happy. That was enough for me. Dinner went smoothly, at least on the surface. The light from the chandelier cast a soft gold over the table. The roast came out right, the potatoes fluffy. Nadia complimented everything, just enough to sound sincere, but I noticed how her eyes kept moving, not just around the room, but through it. They landed on every framed photo, every shelf, every certificate. She lingered on the portrait of Frank in his uniform, then on the old deed framed on the wall, the original property title to the house. She didn't touch her fork for nearly a minute, just stared at it. Then, without asking, she stood and walked over. "This is beautiful," she said softly, tracing the edge of the frame with one manicured finger. "You've had this place a long time." 42 years, I said. Her smile flickered, not admiration, something else. Calculation, maybe. I couldn't name it then, but it left a chill under my skin. Caleb didn't notice. He was talking about work, about the overtime he'd been doing at the construction firm. Nadia nodded along, saying the right words, but her gaze kept drifting. When she looked at Frank's photo, she tilted her head. "He looks kind," she said. "He was," I replied quietly. "He believed in hard work and clear books." "Clear books," she repeated, smiling wider. "That's important." Something about the way she said it made me uneasy, like she understood more than she should. After dinner, she offered to help with dishes. I said yes, mostly to see how she moved when she thought no one was watching. While the water ran, she glanced over her shoulder at me and said almost casually, "You must have a lot of paperwork keeping this place up. Property taxes, insurance, maintenance. I'd get lost in all that." "I manage," I said. "I'm sure you do." Her tone was light, but her eyes didn't match. They were sharp, searching, as if each cupboard and drawer held a secret inventory. When she dried her hands, she took another slow look around the room. "You know," she said, "Caleb and I were talking about how big this place is for one person. You must feel so alone sometimes." The words were wrapped in sympathy, but they felt like testing hooks. Small, harmless until you realize you're already caught. "I like the quiet," I said. "Of course," she murmured, still smiling, "but sometimes quiet can get heavy." She left a few minutes later, kissing my cheek, thanking me for the meal. When their car pulled out of the driveway, the house went still again. The clock ticked. The plates gleamed. Everything looked the same, but didn't feel the same. I sat at the table, the warmth from dinner fading. I thought of the way her hand had rested on Frank's photo, of the way she'd studied the deed on the wall. And that's when the thought first came to me, the one that wouldn't let me sleep later that night. When someone looks at what you own with affection, it feels like love. But when they look at it like a list of assets, it feels like ice. I didn't know it then, but that night, everything inside this house, the furniture, the walls, even my peace, had already become part of her plan. The following Sunday, they came again. Caleb brought dessert, Nadia brought papers. She said they were ideas for her new business. Just early plans, she smiled, but the way she kept her hand on that folder all evening made me uneasy. We were sitting at the same old table, the same light from the window casting long lines across the wood. I'd spent the morning baking apple pie, trying to keep things normal, but even before we ate, I could feel something brewing under the surface. Caleb seemed distracted. He talked fast, smiled too much, like he was building up to something. And then, just as I was pouring coffee, he said it. "Mom, remember the lake property Dad bought when I was a kid?" I nodded. "Of course I remember. You learned to fish there. Frank and I used to camp by the water every summer." Caleb glanced at Nadia, then back at me. "We've been talking about selling it. The land's worth a lot now, and Nadia's been planning to open a small spa downtown. It could really take off." The coffee pot froze in my hand. I put it down slowly. "Selling it?" Nadia leaned forward, voice gentle as if she were explaining something to a child. "It's just an idea, Nancy. We'd use part of the money as capital for the spa. You'd still be part of the decision, of course." I forced a smile, but my chest felt tight. "That land isn't just a piece of property, Nadia. It's where Frank taught Caleb how to swim, where he built that little dock with his own hands." Caleb tried to sound calm. "Mom, I know, but it's been sitting there for years. We could do something meaningful with it now. You always said Dad wanted us to make smart investments." "Smart investments," I repeated softly. "Your father didn't buy that place to make money, Caleb. He bought it to make memories. It was the only thing he wanted to pass down, something you could show your kids one day." Nadia reached across the table and touched Caleb's arm. "Your mom has a big heart," she said sweetly, not looking at me. "But maybe it's time she didn't have to worry about all these old responsibilities. She should rest, enjoy her time, let us handle things." She smiled again, that calm, composed smile, but her eyes weren't on me. They were fixed on the framed photograph on the wall, the one showing Frank standing by the lake, holding a hammer and smiling. The same photo that hung right beside the property deed. "I don't need anyone to handle things for me," I said quietly. Caleb sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Mom, please don't take it the wrong way. We're just trying to build a future. The spa would be Nadia's dream come true, and we'd finally be able to stop worrying about debt." I looked at him, my only son, and saw a man trying to be the good husband, the peacemaker, the bridge between two worlds that would never understand each other. "Debt," I said softly. "You've been working overtime for months, Caleb. What kind of debt are you still talking about?" He hesitated. "Business loans, things for the house, or things for Nadia." The question slipped out before I could stop myself. He looked at me like I'd slapped him. "That's not fair, Mom." Nadia's voice was smooth as silk. "We're a team. What's his is mine, and what's mine is his." "Then why?" I said, my tone sharper than I intended. "Does it always seem like only one of you is spending?" The air went still. The clock ticked. The smell of apple pie suddenly felt heavy, like something burning too slowly. Caleb stood up. "Let's not do this. It's Sunday. We're supposed to enjoy dinner." I wanted to say more, but I bit my tongue. He wasn't the enemy, at least not yet. Nadia stood up too, gathering the empty dishes, her movements slow, deliberate. "I'll clean up," she said. "Oh, you two talk." But there was nothing left to say. Caleb sat down again, staring at his hands. "You don't have to worry about the lake property, Mom. We won't do anything without your approval." I nodded, though I didn't believe him. Nadia's heels clicked softly against the tile as she carried dishes to the sink. From the corner of my eye, I saw her glance again at that framed deed, her reflection faint in the glass. It wasn't affection I saw there. It was assessment. When they left that night, I sat alone at the table, the silence pressing in around me. I looked at Frank's photo, then at the deed beside it. For years, I thought these family dinners were about love, about staying connected. But that night, I realized something I hadn't wanted to see. I thought we were arguing out of love and memory, but what we were really fighting over was control. It was 1 week after that Sunday dinner when Nadia came by again. The same smile, the same perfume, lilac and something sharper underneath. She carried her laptop under one arm and 2 cups of coffee in her hands. "I thought we could take care of that banking thing today," she said cheerfully, setting the cups down. "What banking thing?" I asked, wiping my hands on a towel. The one we talked about last time, moving your savings into an online account, she said, already opening the laptop. It's so much easier to track everything digitally. You'll thank me later. I didn't remember agreeing to it, but she was already typing. Her nails clicked softly on the keys. I'd seen that same rhythm before in auditors. Confident, practiced, the kind that knows exactly where every number goes. I'm not sure I need all that, I said. I've managed fine for years. Of course you have, she said quickly, smiling. But the bank's changing their systems? If we don't update, you might lose access. That word, lose, did what she meant it to. It made me nervous. I didn't want to be a burden, didn't want to seem stubborn. She turned the screen toward me. Look, it's simple. You just sign here and the system automatically links your savings account to your main checking. It'll make transfers faster. Links them? I repeated. You mean merges? She smiled, that calm, patient smile. Not merges, Mom, just syncs. So I can help you monitor things. 2 sets of eyes are better than 1, right? There it was, the casual way she made control sound like kindness. I looked at the line where my name was printed, then at the digital pen she slid across the table. My fingers hesitated. The last time I'd hesitated before signing something was 40 years ago, back when I was still working as an accountant. Flashback, a younger me, in a gray office full of humming machines and paper files. My supervisor, a man named Harold, standing behind my chair. Just sign it, he'd said, impatient. We need to file before closing. I had. 3 days later, we discovered it wasn't an invoice. It was a loan guarantee. The company lost thousands. And Harold? He'd said, "You should have read it." That was the day I learned that a signature is a promise you can't take back, even if you didn't know what you were promising. Back in the present, Nadia was watching me closely. Go ahead, she said gently. It's just a formality. Her voice was soft, but her eyes weren't. There was something behind them, urgency disguised as care. My hand trembled slightly as I took the stylus. Just here, she said, pointing. Then it'll all sync automatically. I signed. The moment the line appeared, she smiled wider. Relief, not gratitude. Perfect, she said, closing the laptop quickly. Now everything's, secure. I tried to ignore the unease in my stomach. I told myself I was being paranoid, that she was just being helpful. She gathered her things and left soon after, humming a tune I didn't recognize. When the door closed, the house felt smaller, as if the walls had moved closer. That evening, my neighbor Pat Lowe stopped by. She always did on Wednesdays, usually bringing her gossip and her small-town wisdom. She noticed the laptop still on the table. You doing online banking now? I hesitated. Nadia helped me set it up, said it's safer. Pat raised an eyebrow. Safer for who? I laughed, trying to brush it off. She's just being helpful. Pat sat down, unwrapping a slice of banana bread she'd brought. Nancy, you know what my daddy used to say? A woman who's too good with words can hide a knife under every one of them. I smiled faintly. You think she's hiding a knife? I think she's hiding something, Pat said simply. And I think you should read every line she asks you to sign. Her words stayed with me long after she left. That night, as I washed the coffee cups, I caught my reflection in the kitchen window, my face lit by the faint glow of the laptop screen. The bank's website was still open, and under the account name I saw a second email address listed next to mine. N. Blake. For a long time I just stared at it, my hands wet and trembling. Somewhere outside, the clock from the porch ticked once, sharp and cold. That was the moment I understood, not the full truth, not yet, but enough to feel the chill of it. I had signed my name onto something I didn't understand, something that wasn't mine anymore. It happened on a Tuesday morning. The sun had barely come through the blinds when I heard the faint ping of my phone, a new email from the bank. Subject line, account activity alert, withdrawal notice. I opened it, half asleep, expecting another statement or system update, but the first line made my chest tighten. $20,000 withdrawn from account ending in 1432. I blinked twice. Then again. There had to be a mistake. I hadn't withdrawn anything. My fingers shook as I dialed the customer service number. After 3 layers of robotic menus and hold music, a woman finally answered. Mrs. Whitlock, I see the transaction you're referring to. she said politely. The withdrawal was made yesterday afternoon at our Cedar Grove branch. That's impossible, I said. I was home all day. I didn't authorize any withdrawal. A pause. Then her tone changed, professional but careful. The transaction appears to have been authorized by your co-account holder, Ms. Nadia Blake. For a second, I couldn't even process the words. My what? Your co-account holder, she repeated. Ms. Blake has full withdrawal rights. That's not true, I said firmly. That's my savings account. My husband and I opened it 40 years ago. I understand, ma'am, but according to our records, an updated authorization form was signed 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, the same week Nadia had come with her laptop. My knees went weak. I had to grip the counter to stay steady. The woman's voice softened. Is there anything else I can help you with today? I hung up before I could answer. At the branch, the fluorescent lights made everything look too bright, too clean. The young teller at the desk smiled as I handed over my ID. There's been some kind of mistake, I said, my voice calm only because I was forcing it to be. I never gave anyone access to my account. The teller typed for a moment, frowning slightly. Then she stood up and walked to a glass office in the corner. Through the pane, I saw her whispering to a man in a suit. When they came back, the man carried a clipboard. Mrs. Whitlock, the authorization looks legitimate. It has your signature here? He turned the form around. There it was. My signature, real, smooth, familiar. I stared at it. She must have reused the one from another document, I said weakly. He hesitated. I'm afraid that's outside our scope to verify. His eyes were kind, but his expression said it all. He thinks I'm confused. He thinks I'm old. That night, Caleb came over. He stood in the doorway with his work boots still on, shoulders stiff. Mom, Nadia told me you've been worried, he said carefully. She said there was some mix-up with your account. Mix-up? I repeated. She took $20,000, Caleb. He exhaled, looking tired. She told me about that. She needed some temporary capital for her business. It's just a short-term thing. She's going to replace it. I stared at him, the son I raised to balance every checkbook before buying candy. She took it without asking. She thought you knew, he said. She's been handling your finances, right? The way he said it, handling, made me want to laugh and cry at once. Caleb, did she tell you she added herself to my account? He rubbed the back of his neck. Mom, you probably just forgot. She said you signed something together. I didn't forget, I snapped. The sharpness in my voice startled us both. He sighed. You're stressing yourself out. Nadia's just trying to help. You always assume the worst. I didn't answer, because I could see that nothing I said would reach him, not through the fog of trust and love she'd wrapped around him. When he left, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the email on my phone again. The bank's transaction record listed a company name next to the withdrawal, Blake Holdings, LLC. I took a picture of it just in case. The night was silent except for the ticking of the old wall clock. I went to the cabinet and pulled out Frank's leather-bound notebook, the one he used to keep near his desk. Inside, his handwriting filled the first few pages in neat, steady lines. On the very first page, he'd written something I hadn't looked at in years. Trust is good, but never hand over the keys. I ran my finger over the ink, faded but firm. His handwriting always had weight to it, like it knew something the rest of us didn't. I closed the notebook slowly. $20,000 was gone. But what terrified me wasn't the money. It was how easily she'd done it, with my own hand, my own name, and how no one, not even my son, believed me. It was a Thursday morning when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, a man in a gray suit stood there holding a clipboard and smiling politely. Good morning, ma'am. I'm with Whitmore Property Services. I'm here for the house appraisal. For a moment, I thought he had the wrong address. Appraisal? I repeated. There must be some mistake. I didn't schedule anything. He glanced down at his papers. Is this 428 Maple Drive? Yes. Then this is the right place. The appointment was made under the names Caleb and Nadia Whitlock. I froze. Caleb and who? He double-checked. Caleb and Nadia Whitlock, joint homeowners. It says here it's for a refinance evaluation. My hands went cold. This house isn't under their names. It's mine. Nancy Whitlock. I've lived here for 40 years. The man hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Ma'am, I just follow the orders on the form. I'm sorry for the confusion." He handed me the paper, and there it was. My address, my house, but the names listed on top were Caleb Whitlock and Nadia Whitlock. I felt my knees weaken. "Excuse me," I said, my voice shaking. "Could you wait here for a minute?" I went inside and grabbed my phone. My hands were trembling so badly I almost dropped it. I called Caleb. He answered, cheerful at first. "Hey, Mom, what's up?" "Caleb, there's a man at my door saying he's here to appraise the house. He says the request was made by you and Nadia." There was a pause, then a sigh. "Oh, that. Mom, it's nothing serious. Nadia's refinancing paperwork got mixed in. We're just reviewing things for the future, that's all." "The future?" I said quietly. "Whose future, Caleb? Because last I checked, this house belongs to me." "Mom, please don't get upset. Nadia's just helping with financial planning. She's better with paperwork than I am." I felt my throat tighten. "Caleb, that woman took $20,000 from my account. Now she's trying to appraise my house. How much more proof do you need before you see what she's doing?" He sighed again, his voice lower now, careful. "Mom, maybe it's time we talk about how stressed you've been lately. You've been forgetful, emotional. Nadia thinks you might need to rest more." "Forgetful?" My voice cracked. "Are you saying I'm imagining this?" "I'm saying maybe you're reading too much into things." I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Then explain why a stranger is standing in my yard, holding a paper that says Caleb and Nadia Whitlock as the owners of my home." He hesitated. "I'll come by later, okay? Just, please don't make a scene." "Make a scene?" I whispered. "Caleb, this is my life. My home. Your father built this with his own hands." "I know, Mom," he said quietly, "but you have to trust us. Nadia's not trying to hurt you." "Not trying to hurt me?" My voice trembled. "She's taking everything I own." There was a long silence. Then, in a tired tone, he said, "Mom, I love you, but you can be sensitive about these things." "I'll handle it." Sensitive. The word hung in the air like an insult. I hung up before he could say more. When I opened the door again, the appraiser was still waiting, looking uncomfortable. "Should I come back another time?" "No," I said stiffly. "You can go ahead. Do whatever your form tells you to do." He nodded awkwardly, walked around the property, took photos, measured the porch. I watched from the window, numb. Every time his camera clicked, it felt like a piece of my life being cataloged for someone else. When he left, he thanked me politely and said, "You'll get the valuation report by next week, Mrs. Whitlock." Mrs. Whitlock. At least he still called me that. I sat at the kitchen table, my hands shaking around my teacup. I couldn't even bring myself to drink. The spoon slipped from my fingers and hit the saucer with a sharp metallic clang. The sound echoed in the quiet kitchen, sharp enough to make my chest ache. I picked up the phone again and stared at it, but I couldn't bring myself to call anyone. Not the bank, not the police, not even Pat. Because what would I say? That my daughter-in-law was stealing my life while smiling across the dinner table? That my son thought I was just a tired, confused old woman imagining things? I looked around the house, the curtains I'd sewn, the clock Frank had repaired over and over, the photo of us on our wedding day. And for the first time, it all looked like it belonged to someone else. I tried to tell myself to stay calm, to think clearly, to be rational, but my chest hurt, and the spoon kept shaking in my hand. Maybe I was getting older, maybe I was too cautious, maybe I was paranoid, but if I was so forgetful, so confused, so old and fragile, then why could I remember the exact date, the exact time, and the exact amount she took from me? If I'm losing my mind, then why do I remember every number she stole? 3 days passed without a word from Caleb. The silence between us felt heavier than any argument. I kept checking my phone, hoping for a message, an apology, something. But nothing came. Then, one afternoon, Pat knocked on my door. She never knocks more than once. She just walks in and yells, "Nancy, I brought pie." But this time she stood on the porch, serious, her hands tucked inside her jacket. "You'd better sit down," she said the moment I opened the door. I led her to the kitchen, poured coffee, and waited. Pat leaned forward, lowering her voice. "You're not going to like this. I was at the county office today, handling some property paperwork for my niece. While I was there, I overheard someone asking about Nadia Blake. I froze. What do you mean, asking about her? Like a background check, Pat said. The clerk told the guy that the name sounded familiar, that she'd seen something under a different last name. Nadia Trent. The name hit me like a cold slap. Trent? Pat nodded. That's what I heard. I didn't want to pry, but I asked around a little. One of the women who works there said that name showed up in an old property dispute file from 5 years ago. Apparently, a woman named Nadia Trent sold a house in Des Moines that didn't even belong to her, claimed it was a clerical mistake, then disappeared before the case went to court. I stared at her, the blood draining from my face. You're saying it's the same person? Pat shrugged. I can't be sure. But how many women named Nadia with that same perfect hair, same fancy handwriting, and same sweet smile could there be? My hands trembled as I reached for my phone. There's a way to find out. I opened the browser, typed Nadia Trent Des Moines real estate fraud, and pressed search. It took only seconds. The screen filled with local news articles, grainy photos, legal notices, and a mugshot from a police file. The woman in the photo had darker hair, but the eyes were identical. Same shape, same calculating calm. Even the way her chin tilted toward the camera, confident, rehearsed. I felt my stomach twist. It's her, I whispered. God help me, it's her. Pat leaned over my shoulder, squinting. That's the woman married to your son? Yes, she just changed her name. From Trent to Blake. Probably before she met Caleb. Pat let out a low whistle. Well, damn. That explains the house appraisal, the money, the fake concern. She's done this before. I stared at the screen again. The headline burned into my mind. Local woman under investigation for property fraud. Suspect flees state. She never fled, I murmured. She just moved here, started over. Pat squeezed my shoulder. You need to go to the police. I already tried, I said quietly. They told me everything was legal. Her name's on the papers now. She's covered her tracks too well. Pat frowned. Then what will you do? I didn't answer. My mind was spinning too fast. That night, after Pat left, I sat alone in the living room, the glow of my laptop still open on the table. The article's photo stared back at me. Nadia Trent, age 34. Same woman, same face, different name. Outside, the wind had picked up. The old windows rattled softly, and the curtains shifted with the draft. I could almost hear Frank's voice in that sound, low and steady, like when he used to warn me. Always listen to what people do, not what they say. I closed the laptop and turned off the lamp. The house was dark except for the faint glow from the streetlight outside. I walked to the window and looked out at the empty driveway where Caleb's car should have been. Somewhere out there, my son was sleeping beside a woman who wasn't who she claimed to be, a woman who had already changed her name once, and now she was changing mine, on bank forms, property deeds, and every record that tied me to this house. The wind howled against the glass, and the frame creaked like an old warning. I wrapped my arms around myself and whispered into the dark, half to the wind, half to Frank, wherever he was. Her name's changed, Frank. And now she's changing my whole life with it. Outside, the wind hit harder, pushing through the tiny cracks around the window frame, humming low and cold like a voice I almost recognized. It sounded like a whisper from the past, a reminder, a warning. Her name has changed. And now she's changing your fate, too. It started with a knock. Soft, polite, the kind of knock that belongs to someone who doesn't want to be refused. When I opened the door, a man in a gray suit stood there, holding a slim leather folder and smiling the kind of smile people wear when they've already made up their minds about you. Good afternoon, Mrs. Whitlock, he said warmly. I'm Dr. Lewis. Nadia asked me to stop by for a brief wellness check. Just routine. Nadia stepped out from behind him, holding a small tray of cookies like this was some kind of friendly visit. She's been a little forgetful lately, she told him sweetly, eyes on me but voice meant for him. I just worry she's under too much stress. Forgetful. That word hung in the air like dust. I forced a small smile. I'm fine, dear. I've been managing this house and my own accounts for 40 years. Dr. Lewis nodded kindly but kept that professional tone. Slow, measured, the way people talk to children or patients. Of course, Mrs. Whitlock, but it never hurts to have someone check in. Would you mind if I asked a few simple questions? I hesitated. Nadia's hand rested lightly on my shoulder. It's just for peace of mind, she said softly. For both of us. So I nodded. He sat across from me, notebook open. Do you ever find yourself misplacing things, Mrs. Whitlock? Sometimes, I said. I'm 66, not immortal. A polite chuckle. Of course. And how about time? Do you ever forget appointments or what day it is? Not unless someone moves the calendar, I said dryly. He smiled again but wrote something down anyway. Behind him, Nadia stood watching, head tilted, lips pressed into an expression that mimicked sympathy, but didn't reach her eyes. After 15 minutes of questions that circled around the same implication, that I was slipping, he closed his folder. Well, he said gently, it's perfectly normal to experience minor lapses with age. I'd recommend having a trusted family member assist with your finances and paperwork, just to make sure everything stays in order. Nadia's voice came quick, warm, rehearsed. That's exactly what I've been telling her. I already take care of most of it anyway. He smiled approvingly. That's wonderful. You're lucky to have such a caring daughter-in-law. She smiled back, modest and triumphant. When they left, I stood in the hallway long after the door closed. The air smelled faintly of her perfume, sweet, synthetic, clinging. That night, I couldn't sleep. The doctor's words echoed in my head, twisting into something heavier. Trusted family member, assist with finances. At dawn, I went to my desk, pulled out the folder where I kept every document I'd signed. There it was, the one from last week. The update, Nadia said, would help with my account access. The paper looked ordinary, printed letterhead, legal, language. But at the bottom, one small section I hadn't noticed before caught my eye. Power of attorney, guardian designation, in case of cognitive decline. And next to it, my signature. Next to that, Nadia's name, written in perfect practice script. Appointed guardian and financial custodian. My stomach dropped. I read it again and again, as if repetition could make it untrue. I could hear her voice in my head, soft, caring. It's just paperwork, Mom. It'll make things easier. No, it would make them hers. The next morning I called her. I need to talk, I said simply. She arrived half an hour later, smiling like always. I brought muffins. You sound tense. I laid the paper on the table. What is this? Her expression didn't falter, but her eyes flickered, a flash of something like annoyance before the sweetness returned. Oh, that, she said. It's just a precaution. The doctor said I was fine, I cut in. He said nothing about giving you control of my accounts. She sighed, a long, patient sound. You're overreacting. I'm just trying to help you before things get complicated. Complicated, I repeated slowly. You mean before I notice? Nadia smiled then, small, cold, measured. You know, it's sad, really, how age makes people so suspicious. I looked her straight in the eye. And it's sad how deceit makes people think they're smarter than everyone else. The mask slipped just a little, her tone softened, but the edges stayed sharp. I'm doing what's best for you, she said. Before you can't do it yourself. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from fury I hadn't let myself feel until now. You're not helping me, I said quietly. You're legalizing theft. She laughed once, short and smooth. Oh, Mom, it's not theft if you sign it willingly. And there it was. The truth, polished and poisonous. She gathered her purse, the same calm smile back in place. You should rest, she said sweetly. All this stress isn't good for your memory. When the door closed behind her, the house went silent again. I sat there staring at the paper, the ink, the signature that was mine but not by choice. And I thought, this is how hell begins. Not with fire or fear, but with doubt. When a liar makes you question your own memory, your own truth, your own mind, that's the moment the real burning starts. It was raining that afternoon, a slow, steady rain that made everything feel heavier. I was in the kitchen trying to keep busy, though the coffee in my cup had gone cold hours ago. Then came the knock. 3 short taps, hesitant. I almost didn't answer. But something in the rhythm, polite, uncertain, made me open the door. A man stood on the porch, soaked through, his hair clinging to his forehead. He looked about 45, tired, worn out in the way grief wears a person down. Mrs. Whitlock? He asked. Yes. He took a shaky breath. My name's David Trent. The name hit me like thunder. Trent? I repeated. He nodded. I think we need to talk. It's about Nadia. For a moment, I just stared. Then I stepped aside. Come in. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, water dripping from his coat. I handed him a towel and motioned for him to sit. He didn't touch the coffee I poured him, just sat there, staring at his hands. Finally, he spoke. I used to be her husband. The room went quiet except for the rain against the window. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed but steady. I saw your name in a public record search, connected to her new address. I needed to warn you. My chest tightened. Warn me about what? He swallowed hard. She's done this before. He took out an old photo from his wallet. Nadia, younger, with darker hair, standing beside him in a wedding dress. The smile on her face was perfect, rehearsed. David's voice was low, heavy. She told me she had cancer. Stage 2. I remember the day she said it like it was yesterday. She cried in my arms, said she didn't want to die without leaving things in order. She needed me to sign some forms so she could manage her treatment costs. He rubbed his temples. There was a hospital, a doctor, even paperwork. All fake, I learned later. But back then, I believed her. He paused, his eyes far away. I sat next to her hospital bed, machines beeping, her hand trembling. She looked up at me and said, "Please, just sign. I don't have much time left." He laughed bitterly. So I did. I signed every paper she gave me. Power of attorney, property transfer, even my insurance documents. And the next morning she was gone. Her clothes, her car, her name, all gone. She drained every account and disappeared. I couldn't speak. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. How long ago? I finally asked. 5 years, he said. I filed reports, but by the time police traced the accounts, everything was transferred to shell companies. One of them was called Blake Holdings. The name hit me like a knife. Blake, I whispered. He nodded slowly. That's when I knew. She just changed her last name. Started over. The rain outside grew heavier, drumming against the windows like footsteps on a roof. I sat back, my hands gripping the edge of the table. She married my son, I said quietly. She's doing it again. David looked at me, tired but with a kind of grim recognition. She's using the same playbook. She gets their trust, isolates them, makes them feel guilty. Then she takes everything. I felt a wave of nausea rise in my chest. The pieces fell into place. The forged signature, the power of attorney, the fake doctor, the appraisal. It wasn't just about money. It was about control. She's rewriting my life the same way she rewrote yours, I said softly. David nodded. That's what she does. She studies people, learns their weaknesses. With me, it was guilt. With you, maybe age or grief. She always finds a way in. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the rain. Finally, he said, I'm sorry I didn't find you sooner. I shook my head. No, you found me just in time. I stood, went to the cabinet, and pulled out the file I'd started keeping. The emails, the screenshots, the fake documents she'd left behind. I spread them across the table. David leaned forward, eyes narrowing. This is more than what I had. I nodded. She got smarter, but she made one mistake. She thought I'd stop fighting. He looked at me then, really looked. You're not stopping, are you? No, I said firmly. I may be old, but I remember numbers, dates, faces. And now I have yours. You're living proof of what she's done. He nodded slowly. If you're planning to go to the police, I'll go with you. I still have records, emails, financials. They laughed at me when I filed the first time. Maybe they won't laugh at both of us. I took a deep breath, feeling something shift inside me. For months, I'd been dismissed, pitied, gaslighted, treated like a fragile old woman. But now, sitting across from another victim, the fog in my head began to clear. This wasn't confusion. It wasn't paranoia. It was a pattern, one I could finally prove. Outside, the wind picked up and the rain turned to a hard, steady downpour. The clock on the wall ticked, then stopped. The silence was so sharp it made the air feel thick. I looked at the man across from me. Another life she'd ruined, another story she'd rewritten, and I made a silent promise. This time she wouldn't disappear quietly. This time I'd leave her nowhere to run. I gathered the papers into a neat pile, the sound of each sheet snapping like a matchstick. I know what I have to do now, I said. David looked at me uncertain. What's that? I met his eyes. Fight back and make sure that when this story ends, the evidence speaks louder than her lies. The thunder rolled outside, shaking the windows, and for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid of the storm, because the truth was finally on my side. I knew I had to fight back, and this time, the evidence would speak for me. Pat came over early that morning with 2 cups of coffee and a folder under her arm. No small talk this time. No jokes about needing stronger brew for stronger crimes. We both knew what the day was about. Ready? She asked. As I'll ever be, I said, pulling my coat tighter around me. We'd spent the last 3 nights going through boxes, receipts, old letters, insurance papers, even those useless customer copies I used to keep out of habit. Pat was better at sorting than I was. She'd worked as a notary for years, knew how to read the fine print. Every paper we touched told a little story, small invisible threads that Nadia had woven around my life. When we arrived at Owen Reese's office, the first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. No receptionist, no ringing phones, just the sound of rain tapping against the window. Owen looked like the kind of man who'd been born calm. Gray hair, soft voice, slow movements. He listened more than he spoke. He studied our pile of documents, flipping carefully through each page. I watched his brow furrow deeper the longer he read. After a while, he leaned back in his chair and folded his hands. Mrs. Whitlock, he said, you mentioned a company called Blake Holdings, LLC? Yes, I said. That's the name on the withdrawals from my account, and the property appraisal last month. He nodded. I ran a preliminary check. It's registered under your daughter-in-law's name, but the registration trail ends abruptly. No legitimate business filings, no employee records, no tax submissions. Pat frowned. So it's a shell company? Exactly, Owen said. What's more interesting is the formation documents. The listed agent used a state ID that doesn't match any record in the national database. Whoever set this up used a fake identity, and not their first one. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Can you prove that? He gave a small smile. That's the easy part. He turned his monitor toward us. On the screen was a scanned document, the original registration for Blake Holdings. At the bottom, beneath a block of legal text, was a digital signature. Not just a name, a fingerprint scan. Owen clicked a few buttons, bringing up a comparison file. I had one of my contacts run this through an old law enforcement database. The fingerprint doesn't match Nadia Blake. It belongs to someone else entirely, a defunct alias from a fraud case in Illinois. He zoomed in. The name on that file was Nadia Trent. Pat exhaled sharply. Well, I'll be damned. I just sat there staring at the glowing signature on the screen. It looked so ordinary and a thin, curved line, confident and precise. But it wasn't mine. It wasn't even hers. It was no one's. A phantom's mark living inside my property records, my bank accounts, my life. Owen kept talking, explaining how false registration worked, how a shell company could be used to move stolen assets. But his voice drifted into the background. All I could see was that signature. It reminded me of Frank's handwriting. Careful, deliberate, but stripped of warmth, a ghost version. I trusted her, I whispered. I let her into this house, into my son's life, into everything we built, and now she's erased us, one document at a time. Pat put a hand on my arm. We've got something solid now, Nancy. This isn't just suspicion anymore. Owen nodded. If we can connect this fake ID to her current activities, it becomes federal. Identity fraud, asset laundering. Serious charges. But we'll need evidence that she knew what she was doing. Oh, she knows, I said quietly. Owen's gaze softened. Then you'll need to prove intent. And that means one thing. We catch her acting as both Nadia Blake and Nadia Trent. 2 identities, 1 person. Pat leaned forward. How? Owen smiled faintly. You'd be surprised how often con artists trip over their own lies. 1 wrong signature, 1 repeated password, 1 voice call. Pat grinned. Sounds like we need to get her talking. Owen nodded. Legally, of course. Recordings are admissible if at least one party consents. And since that party will be you. His voice trailed off as he slid a small recorder across the desk. I stared at it, the tiny red light blinking softly, waiting to be used. It looked fragile, almost harmless, but it felt like holding a weapon. Pat reached over, touching my hand gently. You okay? I nodded slowly. Yes, I thought my fight would be with her lies. I didn't realize it would be on paper. Owen leaned forward, his tone gentle but firm. That's how people like her win, Mrs. Whitlock. They hide behind documents, signatures, and polite words. But paper leaves trails, and trails tell the truth. The room went quiet again. The only sound was the clock ticking above his desk. I followed the second hand, one small movement after another, realizing how much of my life had been signed away in moments like these. After a long silence, Owen gathered the files into a neat stack. You have something rare, Mrs. Whitlock, he said. A clear pattern, a witness, and now a falsified document with a mismatched fingerprint. That's your ghost. Ghost? I repeated. He nodded. That signature, the one she used to take what's yours. It doesn't belong to her. It doesn't belong to anyone alive. Legally speaking, you're being haunted by a name that doesn't exist. I stared at the printout, the ink still faintly glossy, and in that moment I saw it for what it was. Not just fraud, not just betrayal. It was an erasure. Someone had taken my history and signed their name over it. I swallowed hard, my voice low and rough. I see it now, I said. I see the ghost that's been living in my papers. I traced the fake signature with my fingertip, smooth, cold, final. I see the ghost, I whispered, and it's signing my name. I looked up at Owen and Pat. I see the shadow that stole everything, the shadow that calls herself my daughter-in-law. My throat tightened, and for the first time I let the anger rise, not the shaky, helpless kind, but sharp and clean. I see her ghost signing my life away, I said again, louder. And now I'm signing her end. The clock ticked once more and stopped. And in that stillness, I felt something solid inside me click into place. I saw the ghost's signature signed, and it was mine. That morning, I woke before sunrise. The air was still, heavy with that strange calm that comes before something ends. I moved quietly through the house, setting the table in the living room just as she liked it. A pot of tea, sugar bowl, lemon slices, everything neat and proper. But this time, something new sat beneath the tablecloth. A small voice recorder hidden in the hollow of an old sugar tin. I tested it twice, whispering to myself to make sure it worked. My voice came through tinny and fragile, a reminder of how age changes sound but not resolve. Then I practiced my lines. Not rehearsed words, just the tone. Calm, patient, unafraid. When I was ready, I dialed her number. Nadia, dear, I said softly. I've been thinking about what you suggested. Signing those property papers again. I think you might be right. Maybe redoing the authorization will make the transfer smoother. There was a pause, then her bright, polished voice came through the line. I'm so glad to hear that, Mom. I'll be right over. It wasn't even 10 minutes before her car pulled into the driveway. She moved through the door with her usual confidence, the smell of her perfume always arriving before she did. Tea? I asked, smiling as if nothing had happened between us. She nodded, that same gentle smile she used on everyone she planned to ruin. You know me too well. I poured the tea slowly, watching the steam rise between us like a veil. You said you needed my signature? I asked. Yes, she said, setting her bag on the table. Just a few documents to confirm the updated authorization. Once you sign, everything transfers officially. It'll make things easier for Caleb, too. She slid the papers toward me. Legal forms, crisp, professional, and false. I looked at them for a moment, then looked up at her. You know, I said casually, your father-in-law chose me to handle his accounting for 30 years. Nadia smiled without looking up. Because you were thrifty? I shook my head slowly, because I always checked the signature before I trusted the person signing it. The pause that followed was small but heavy. She blinked once, too slowly. I'm sure everything's in order, she said lightly, though her hand tightened around her pen. I leaned back. You've always been good with paperwork, Nadia. So careful, but even careful people slip when they think no one's watching. Her smile froze. What are you talking about? I pointed to the page. This signature block here, the notary section. It's dated last week. You were in Chicago last week, weren't you? She hesitated just long enough for the trap to tighten. That's because the lawyer handled it remotely, she said quickly. I nodded. Which lawyer? She blinked again. You don't know him? Then maybe I should? For the first time, her voice sharpened. Mom, you're overthinking this. Just sign. Once we file, the assets are fully... She stopped. Too late. Her own words slipped out faster than her mind could stop them. Once you sign, I'll have everything legally in my name. Silence. The kind that doesn't feel empty. The kind that sounds like a clock stopping. I set the pen down gently. Thank you, I said. That's exactly what I needed. Nadia frowned. What? The door behind her opened. Owen stepped in, calm as always, holding a slim folder in his hand. Mrs. Whitlock doesn't need to sign anything today, he said evenly. Because these documents, he held them up, are already under investigation. Nadia's head snapped toward him. Who are you? Owen Reese, he said, attorney at law. And these, he tapped the folder, are certified copies of your previous marriage license to a Mr. David Trent, and your real name, Nadia Trent. She froze, color draining from her face. The front door creaked again. Caleb stood there, eyes wide, confusion giving way to horror as he looked between us. Nadia, he said softly, voice shaking. What is he talking about? She spun toward him, desperate. Caleb, it's not what it looks like. Then what is it? I asked, my voice calm but unrelenting, because to me it looks like you built your whole life out of signatures and lies. Mom? Caleb started, but I raised a hand. Nadia's mask finally cracked. You old fool, she shouted. Do you think this changes anything? You think anyone will believe? Owen placed a small black recorder on the table. The sugar bowl beside it gave a faint click. I think, he said evenly, they'll believe your own words. The sound of her voice filled the room, her exact confession clear as glass. Once you sign, I'll have everything legally in my name. Her eyes went wide. The door burst open as the officers entered, calm and professional, reading her rights. Nadia's scream echoed once, sharp, furious, then gone. Caleb sank to the chair, head in his hands. Owen placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder before following the officers out. I stood still, the room spinning in quiet motion. The tea cooling, the light fading across the floor. For 2 years she had filled this house with her lies. And now her own words had become her sentence. As they led her away, she turned once, eyes full of hate and disbelief. I met her gaze and said softly, Sometimes, Nadia, the loudest confession isn't shouted, it's recorded. And in that moment I knew. That single sentence she let slip was the verdict she wrote for herself. The police station smelled of coffee and rain, the kind of smell that clings to everything, to the chairs, the papers, the people. I sat in the observation room, staring through the thick glass. On the other side, Nadia sat alone at a metal table, her wrists free now, but her posture locked tight. She looked smaller somehow, stripped of her perfect clothes, her perfect voice, her perfect lies. An officer walked past, glancing in. She's asking to see you, he said. I nodded. Let her. When I entered the interrogation room, she lifted her head slowly. Her eyes were dull, her hair slightly out of place, but she still managed a small, bitter smile. Mrs. Whitlock, she said, her voice low, calm, almost mocking. You think you've won? I sat down across from her, folding my hands on the table. I don't think anything, Nadia. I just showed them what was real. She leaned forward, her tone sharp. They'll never really believe you. You're just an old woman with a story. I can still walk out of here and say you were confused, paranoid, manipulated. People love to believe that about your kind, lonely widows losing their minds. I didn't blink. You've said that before. You've said it so many times you almost believe it yourself. Her eyes flashed. And you think a few papers and some gossip change anything? You think they'll trust you over me? I smiled faintly. I don't need them to trust me, Nadia. She frowned. Then what do you need? I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the small USB drive Owen had given me, the one that had lived hidden inside the sugar bowl. I set it gently on the table between us. The sound it made was to a small click against metal, cut through the silence like thunder. That, I said quietly, is my memory. Her lips parted slightly. What? The recording, I said, my voice steady. Your voice, saying exactly what you came here to say. Once you sign, everything becomes official, properly under my care. Remember that? For the first time, she didn't answer. Her expression cracked, just a flicker, but enough. I leaned closer, keeping my tone low, firm, almost kind. You wanted me to doubt myself, to think I was losing my mind. But the thing about numbers and truth is, they don't age, they don't forget. Nadia swallowed hard. Her fingers twitched on the tabletop. You built your life on signatures and lies, I said softly. But you forgot something. Every lie leaves an echo. She looked away then, jaw tight, eyes glassy. You think this is justice? She muttered. You think this makes you better than me? No, I said simply. It just makes me free. The clock on the wall ticked once. Outside, the rain hit the window harder, steady, cleansing. I stood up slowly. You'll have time to think about it, Nadia. Maybe you'll even come up with a new name. You're good at that. She looked up, fury and defeat tangled in her eyes. You won't always have proof, you know. One day you'll forget. You'll be just another old woman shouting at shadows. I smiled faintly. Maybe, but today isn't that day. I pushed the USB across the table toward her. It slid across the metal surface and stopped right in front of her trembling hand. Do you hear that sound? I said quietly. She didn't answer. That's the sound of the truth hitting the table. For a moment, the air between us went still, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down. Her shoulders slumped. The mask, the smile, the control, the performance fell away, and what was left wasn't confidence. It was fear. The officer opened the door behind me. I didn't look back as I walked out, but I heard it, the small, sharp clack of the USB falling from her fingers to the floor. That sound, not the shouting, not the lies, was the real ending, because silence, when it finally arrives, is the only thing a liar can't manipulate. She said, You think you've won? And I said, I don't need to win. I have the recording. Then the little USB hit the table, and for the first time, she had nothing left to say. The red and blue lights danced across my living room window, soft at first, then sharp, slicing through the curtains like the pulse of something too bright to look at. For a moment, the house looked alive again. The flickering colors touched every familiar surface, the photo frames, the wood-grain table, the old clock that hadn't worked since Frank passed. And then, as the sirens faded, the silence came back. I stood there in the half-dark, holding a mug that had gone cold hours ago. Outside, the officers were finishing the paperwork. I could see their shadows moving, their radios crackling softly in the rain. Through the window, the reflection of those lights trembled on the glass. Blue, red, blue again. It reminded me of something I once read. Justice has no warmth. It only burns clean. And God, it was true. Nothing feels colder than the light of justice shining through your own window. I looked around the living room, the one that used to feel so full. The fireplace, the soft chair where Caleb used to sit, the framed photo of the three of us. There, between Frank's smiling face and Caleb's arm around my shoulders, was a space where Nadia had once stood pretending to belong. I stepped closer, fingertips brushing the glass. Her smile in that photo was perfect, not wide, not forced, just practiced enough to look real. I remembered how proud Caleb had been that day. She fits right in, doesn't she, Mom? He'd said, his arm wrapped around her waist. And I had nodded because I wanted to believe it. Now, all that remained of her was a gap. Not in the picture, but in the life we thought we had. The house made small sounds, the heater ticking, the roof creaking, the quiet shifting of old wood. Normal sounds, safe sounds. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something invisible had been cut out of me. Not love, but trust. People like Nadia don't just steal money. They steal the parts of you that used to believe people were mostly good. I turned off the lamp. The room dimmed until only the faint light from outside remained. Across the street, Helen's house glowed softly, a sign of life, of normalcy, of someone who still slept without locking every door twice. I wondered when I'd sleep like that again. The doorbell rang once, gentle, cautious. When I opened the door, Caleb stood there, his face pale but calmer than I'd seen in weeks. They said she confessed, he said quietly. I nodded. They usually do, once the story's over. He looked past me into the house, his gaze landing on the photo on the mantel. Can I take that down? He asked softly. I thought for a moment, then shook my head. No, leave it. He frowned slightly. She was part of this house, I said. Not the good part, maybe, But the truth isn't clean, Caleb. It's messy. And pretending she wasn't here won't make the hurt smaller. He looked at me for a long time, then nodded. I don't know how to make this right, he whispered. You don't, I said. You just start again. We stood there together, listening to the hum of the police radios outside, the slow drip of rain off the eaves. She'll go to prison, he said finally. For a long time. I know. He took a shaky breath. Do you ever feel sorry for her? I thought about that, about the cold calculation in her eyes, the practiced charm, the fake tears. Then I shook my head. No, but I do feel sorry for the part of her that once might have known what love was, before she turned it into a weapon. He nodded again, eyes shining. You're stronger than I ever knew, Mom. I smiled faintly. So are you. You just forgot for a while. Outside, one of the police cars started to pull away. The light swept across the window one last time. Blue, then red, then gone. The house fell back into darkness, not the fearful kind, but the kind that finally felt earned. I walked to the table, picked up the cold mug, and set it in the sink. Through the window, I could still see the faint reflection of that family photo, 3 faces in one empty space. And for the first time, that emptiness didn't ache. It simply told the truth. I turned away, whispered softly into the still air. Justice doesn't warm you. It just leaves you clean enough to start over. The afternoon light stretched across the backyard, soft and gold, like the kind that forgives everything it touches. I was sitting on the old bench Frank built years ago, the one that always creaked on the left side, when I heard the screen door open. Caleb stepped out, hands in his pockets, head low. For a moment, he just stood there, staring at the garden as if searching for words among the flowers. I don't even know where to start, he said quietly. I looked up, shielding my eyes from the light. Start with the truth. It's lighter to carry. He sat beside me, elbows on his knees. The wood groaned under our weight, the same way it used to when he was little and we'd sit here after he'd done something wrong. I loved the wrong person, he finally said. His voice cracked just enough to break something inside me. I turned toward him. No, I said softly. You didn't love the wrong person. You just loved someone who never really existed. He frowned, confused. She built a mask, Caleb, I continued, a perfect woman, thoughtful, kind, fragile. You loved the version of her she wanted you to see. That's not your fault. Real love doesn't make you blind. It just makes you hope. He nodded, staring at the grass. I should have listened to you. No, I said again, shaking my head. You should have listened to yourself, but she made sure you couldn't. The wind moved through the orchids at the edge of the porch, white petals trembling in the light. They'd survived everything. The cold, the neglect, the storm. They'd just needed room to breathe again. Before either of us spoke again, Owen came through the gate. His sleeves were rolled up, a folder tucked under his arm. He looked tired but relieved. I didn't want to call, he said. Thought I should tell you in person. Caleb stood up as I did. It's over? Owen nodded. Completely. The court ruled in your favor. The property, the accounts, the investments, everything's officially back in your name. She forfeited all claims. I let out a slow breath. Not joy, not triumph, just release. Thank you, I said. Owen smiled faintly. You earned it, Nancy. You didn't just fight for the house. You fought for the truth. When he left, Caleb and I sat back down. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. He ran a hand through his hair. I don't know how you did it. I didn't, I said. The truth did. I just stopped running from it. He looked at me, eyes glassy with guilt and something like pride. You're stronger than I ever knew. I smiled. We all are. Sometimes it takes being broken to remember it. The wind picked up again, brushing against the orchids. They leaned into the light, fragile but unafraid. Caleb followed my gaze. They're beautiful, he murmured. They bloom best, I said softly, when no one tries to control them. For a while, we sat in silence, mother and son side by side, not mending the past, but letting it rest. And in that quiet, I realized something I hadn't before. Justice isn't a victory. It's not the moment they say you were right. It's the moment you finally get your own voice back. And this time, no one can take it from you. A year later, the garden was alive again. The lilacs had bloomed early that spring, their color softer than I remembered, and the orchids, those stubborn, quiet survivors, had spread wider than before. I was pruning the roses when I heard the familiar creak of my gate. Pat Lowe's voice carried across the yard before she even appeared. "Well, look at you, Nancy Whitlock, the queen of second chances." She held up a basket covered with a kitchen towel. "Brought you something. Blueberry muffins, fresh out of the oven. Don't ask how many I already ate." I laughed, wiping my hands on my apron. "You mean how many you left for me?" Pat smirked and plopped the basket on the patio table. "Speaking of leaving, that lawyer of yours, what's his name, Owen? He's been leaving my store every week with those fancy cinnamon rolls you like. You think that's a coincidence?" I raised an eyebrow. "You think a man who spends half his life in court wants to spend the other half watching me prune orchids?" Pat shrugged. "Stranger things have happened. Justice does funny things to people. Maybe it made him romantic." I smiled. Or maybe he just likes cinnamon. We both laughed. For the first time in a long while, the laughter didn't feel like something borrowed. As she left, she turned back at the gate. "You know, it's nice seeing you happy again." "Happy?" I said, glancing around the garden. "No, Pat. I'm steady. That's better." Not long after, Caleb's car pulled up by the curb. He got out carrying a small white orchid in a clay pot. "Thought you might like another one for the porch," he said, a little shy like a boy again. I took it carefully, running my fingers over the petals. "They're beautiful," I said softly. He smiled. "They reminded me of you." I looked at the bloom, then back at him. "You know, they grow best when no one tries to control them too much." He tilted his head, thoughtful. "Yeah," he said. "I guess that's true for people, too." We shared a quiet moment. No guilt left, no ghosts between us. Just air, sunlight, and the sound of a wind chime moving in the breeze. After he left, I stayed in the garden a while longer, sitting in Frank's old chair, the one that still leaned slightly to the right. The air smelled of rain and earth. A bee hovered over the new orchid, and the sun caught its wings like glass. And I thought, at 66, after everything, I had finally learned something simple but sharp. Sometimes the ones who say, "I'm just trying to help," are the ones digging your grave. But justice, if you're brave enough to hold on to it, will always bloom again.